Inside a crowded congressional hearing chamber, witnessed by 42 million viewers nationwide, Jasmine Crockett entered carrying a crimson folder while Marco Rubio casually browsed his smartphone, anticipating just another routine political theater session. However, the moment she raised her eyes and declared, "Not every person wearing formal attire possesses integrity," the entire room temperature seemed to drop. In precisely 7 minutes, she revealed a ghost corporation, a suspicious banking transfer, and a documented signature that Rubio claimed he had never authorized. His support team immediately began scrambling. Her voice remained steady throughout. What secrets did that folder contain that caused one of America's most influential senators to completely crumble on national television? Keep watching, because this story deserves your complete attention. The CSPAN cameras rolled continuously as they typically did during these sessions. Standard wide-angle shots, mundane discussions, just another predictable day of governmental procedures. The scheduled agenda appeared as boring as recycled paperwork. Committee reports, standard procedural matters, courteous interruptions. Everyone anticipated the usual repetitive political performance, Marco Rubio included. He occupied a central position at the committee table, casually checking text messages on his device, appearing disconnected and perhaps mildly entertained. Nothing suggested any urgency was approaching. Staff members exchanged quiet conversations. Journalists showed minimal interest, and spectators in the gallery nursed their morning coffee with visible boredom. This session was meant to be completely unremarkable. Then Jasmine Crockett made her entrance. She moved without haste or anxiety, unaccompanied by assistants, carrying only a solitary red folder that she positioned quietly before taking her designated seat. Initially, few people noticed her presence, yet something unusual marked her demeanor. Her movements appeared calculated and purposeful. Her gaze didn't seek validation from the room's occupants. Instead, her eyes remained fixed straight ahead, cold and impenetrable, like tempered steel behind protective glass. She settled into her chair deliberately, took a single deep breath, and adjusted her microphone with the precision of a medical professional preparing for surgery. Rubio remained focused on his device, still quietly amused by his text conversation, completely unaware that the dynamics were shifting around him. Jasmine traced her thumb along the folder's binding, appearing almost unconscious of the gesture. However, this wasn't nervousness manifesting itself. This was preparation, resembling a pilot conducting systematic pre-flight checks. Every gesture communicated the same message clearly. She hadn't arrived to engage in casual discussion. She had come to reveal hidden truths. Then she began speaking. A single statement, delivered quietly, yet with devastating impact. "Not every individual who dresses professionally maintains clean hands," she announced, her words slicing through the atmosphere like razor-sharp glass. "Today, we will demonstrate this fact." The moment stretched endlessly, electrically charged and breathless, as though the chamber walls themselves recognized that something irreversible had just commenced. Jasmine remained completely composed in the silence she had created. She allowed it to expand and permeate through the wooden table grain and into the consciousness of every person present. Marco Rubio shifted position for the first time, not dramatically, but defensively, subtle and instinctual, the type of movement someone makes when their confidence begins cracking. He cleared his throat more for personal comfort than communication purposes, yet Jasmine showed no acknowledgement of his discomfort. Her focus remained unwavering, her hands motionless as though the next document in her folder represented more than mere paper, but rather a critical pressure point. She withdrew a single document, holding it lightly at one corner. No dramatic flourishes or theatrical gestures, simply quiet authority. "Based on Federal Election Commission records," she began, her tone remaining low and measured. "During the previous 14 months, Several transfers totaling $117,600 were processed from Senator Rubio's campaign fund to an entity called Strategic Harbor Partners, LLC. Her words maintained a steady pace, neither rushed nor delayed. They progressed like footsteps taken down a lengthy corridor, firm, confident, and advancing toward a door nobody wanted opened. From the gallery section, a reporter's pen stopped moving across paper. Staff members lifted their attention from tablet screens. The room had transformed from performance venue to exposure site, with Jasmine wielding the surgical instrument. She proceeded to the following document, her fingers deliberate, her voice unshaken. The fascinating aspect is that this corporation, compensated under strategic consulting designation, maintains no registered personnel, no confirmed business location, and was officially terminated by Florida's Department of State during 2021. That declaration didn't shout its message, it pierced directly. Rubio's facial expression didn't collapse entirely, but visible cracks appeared. A single muscle above his eyebrow tensed like a tightly wound string pulled beyond its limit. The information presented wasn't speculative in nature. It was documented, cold, and publicly accessible. Jasmine wasn't making accusations. She was providing confirmation. She permitted the statement to settle before adding, no staff members, no physical headquarters, no functioning telephone connections, yet continuing to receive substantial payments from a current United States Senator's campaign treasury. There was no confusion about what this represented. This wasn't questioning. This was systematic countdown, a methodical dissection of credibility exposed before colleagues, cameras, and the entire country. The strength in Jasmine's presentation wasn't found in volume. It resided in the precision, in how each word locked together like iron teeth, securing around a truth someone desperately wanted to remain hidden. Then she delivered the devastating line. A phantom company cannot provide strategic guidance, she stated. However, it can launder financial resources. Audible gasps weren't heard, but hearts definitely skipped beats. The words sliced cleanly through the air and remained suspended there, too authentic to dismiss and too precise to deny. Rubio's posture changed immediately. He leaned forward toward his microphone, not displaying confidence, but exhibiting the coiled energy of someone who had been cornered too severely. "You're fabricating this information," he snapped, sharp, defensive, louder than the situation required. "This represents pure fiction, approaching slanderous territory." But his voice found no supportive echo. No one offered understanding nods. No one chuckled in his defense. The room's weight had shifted decisively and wasn't favoring his position. Jasmine showed no reaction. She didn't even blink. She reached calmly into her folder and produced a single printed page. Not flashy, not highlighted in bright colors, simply a clean clinical document. She displayed it like a piece of weathered evidence. "I contacted their listed number on 3 separate occasions," she stated evenly. 3 attempts, 3 automated disconnection messages. She allowed that information to hang briefly before her voice dropped half an octave, not as intimidation, but as judgment. Yet the financial transfers processed without any complications whatsoever. Nobody spoke. One aide, halfway through lifting a water glass, froze completely. A journalist in the second row silently mouthed something to her colleague, who remained transfixed by the unfolding scene. Rubio's lips separated, but no argument emerged because what Jasmine had just presented wasn't an accusation. It was a surgical incision, and Rubio was already hemorrhaging from the silence surrounding him. The tension throughout the chamber didn't dissipate. It only intensified further. Jasmine's previous statement hadn't been the final blow. It was merely the opening move. Rubio no longer sat with comfort. He now leaned forward, not with confidence, but with wariness, the kind that develops when you realize you're about to be trapped. Jasmine didn't behave as though she had scored a victory. She didn't smile or pause for recognition. She simply turned the page within her folder like she was following a systematic checklist. Her fingers paused momentarily, steady and controlled. Then she looked up. Her voice emerged low and measured. "Let's discuss air transportation." She didn't require volume. Her words carried significant weight independently. "There was a private aircraft, tail number 9, Hotel Juliet 4 Victor, chartered to Panama during November last year," she said, each syllable carefully measured. "The expense was categorized under your campaign security strategy evaluation." She placed the flight documentation on the table before her. "Payment wasn't processed directly by your campaign, but through a bundled donation organization based in Tampa, 3 layers of shell organizations deep." People throughout the room began paying closer attention. Jasmine indicated a specific line on the document. "The official justification listed threat assessment Latin American corridor." She didn't laugh, but the silence itself seemed to mock the phrase. The explanation sounded ridiculous. She let it resonate briefly, then retrieved another document. This time, a screenshot from video footage captured not by any government agency, but by an ordinary citizen using a smartphone. However, a blogger named Eli Mendoza, who was conducting live streaming from Casco Viejo that particular weekend, documented something entirely different. She positioned the image on the table slowly and carefully. It revealed Marco Rubio at a rooftop establishment in Panama, standing beneath decorative lighting, holding a wine glass. He wore a casual white shirt and smiled alongside 5 men surrounding him. All were wealthy property developers with connections to projects in Panama, Belize, and Florida. No security personnel were visible, no briefing materials, no official meetings, just beverages, expensive cigars, and a beautiful sunset. Jasmine gave the room time to absorb the image before making any additional comments. "That doesn't represent strategy," she said. "That represents access." She maintained her calm tone. She didn't need to raise it. Steel had entered her voice now, quiet, controlled, final. She looked beyond Rubio and spoke as though addressing something larger than just one individual. "The only strategy evident here," she added, "was determining how to launder money through land dealings." That statement landed with tremendous impact, not like a dramatic punch, but like an undeniable truth no one could challenge. Rubio's face changed visibly. Perspiration began forming on his forehead, noticeable even under the bright chamber lighting. He blinked and tugged at his collar as though the air had thickened around him. "You don't comprehend the full context," he said. But the words lacked confidence. They sounded more like pleading than defending. Jasmine didn't hesitate. She didn't even pause. From her folder, she extracted one more document, this time a glossy invoice from the flight company detailing the route, expenses, and donation trail. She held it up clearly, arms steady, eyes locked on target. "I understand the mathematics," she said. "And mathematics don't lie. People do." No one in the chamber uttered a word. The truth had already spoken for itself. The moment after Jasmine raised that flight invoice continued hanging in the room like electrical charge before a thunderstorm. The silence wasn't merely stillness anymore. It was dread slowly thickening the atmosphere. And Jasmine, seated in absolute control, wasn't finished. She turned another page, this time more slowly than before. Her fingertips grazed the document's edge as though preparing for impact. But she wouldn't be the one experiencing it. This page differed from the others. No numbers, no photographs, just words. Words captured on recording, the kind that didn't require commentary to destroy completely. Her voice dropped lower, not for dramatic effect, but for surgical precision. "I possess here a verified transcript of a telephone conversation between Senator Rubio's senior campaign aide and a donor known to this committee," she said, articulating each word like a forensic expert naming instruments before an operation. "It's dated January 12th. The call occurred at 2:17 p.m., and the subject was financial matters. There was no change in her tone, no flicker of uncertainty, specifically a wire transfer that had encountered complications. She tapped once on the page with her finger. The sound echoed faintly through the stillness, as though announcing that time had expired. Then she read it aloud. "Don't process it through Chase anymore. They're beginning to ask questions." The words dropped like lead weights. She didn't need to explain the meaning. Everyone in that chamber, from legal assistants to junior staff members and even the press gallery, understood immediately. That wasn't a suggestion. That was a red flag in motion, the kind of sentence whispered just before something illegal becomes undeniable. One man in the third row shifted uncomfortably. Another removed his glasses and cleaned them, though they were already spotless. "The amount in question," Jasmine continued, her tone never rising, "was $42,000. She looked down, flipping to a second document. Banking details printed clearly, a transfer trail without disguise. The funds were moved to an account registered to a nonprofit organization based in Doral, Florida. On paper, it appeared legitimate until we traced the registration pathway." She paused just long enough for the silence to become suffocating. Then Rubio's voice cracked across the room like a splintering window. "I have no knowledge of that." It was louder than necessary. This wasn't confidence. This was collapse. The echo still lingered when Jasmine moved again. She didn't raise her head. She didn't match his volume. Instead, she flipped the next page forward, revealing a printout with an official Florida business filing. When she spoke again, her voice was almost quiet. "The account is registered under the name Jose Armenta." She finally looked up, not hurried, not angry, but with the weight of someone holding proof that could end careers. Her eyes didn't blink, and her delivery didn't change as she spoke the next line with steady clinical finality. "The individual listed as the founder of the nonprofit on the Florida State Business Registry, Marco Rubio." There were no gasps, no shouts, only stillness. The kind of stillness that meant the room understood. This wasn't a headline. This was a reckoning. The silence hadn't lifted. It only evolved. No longer the silence of shock, but of recognition, like the soundless moment before a verdict is announced. Rubio sat rigidly now, hands clenched beneath the table. The weight of each document Jasmine had produced beginning to settle visibly across his shoulders. But she wasn't done. She didn't flinch from the weight in the room. She used it. One more sheet slid from her folder, this one smooth, cream-colored, and printed with the unmistakable letterhead of the Ritz-Carlton. She held it differently than the others, not like evidence, but like a final puzzle piece. "This is an invoice," Jasmine began, her voice low but crystal clear, "for a 3-night stay at the Ritz-Carlton, Washington, D.C. She let the paper hang for a moment in her fingers, then placed it gently on the table for all to see. "The accommodation, a luxury suite. The nightly rate, $1,789. The total for the stay, $5,367. Filed directly under your campaign expenditures." Her eyes didn't move. Her tone didn't waver. "The expense classification?" she asked, almost rhetorically. "Post-election strategic development." There was no smirk from Rubio this time, no rebuttal, just stillness, the kind that grows when the temperature in a room hasn't dropped, but the certainty has. Jasmine flipped the page. "The suite was paid for by a corporate PAC subsidiary," she continued. "But according to hotel records, there were no meetings scheduled in the room, no strategy briefings, no registered attendees, just a single room, no notes, no calendar logs, no supporting materials." Then she reached beneath her file and withdrew a photograph printed in black and white, time-stamped with a hallway number etched faintly in the corner. "But there is this," she said, placing the photo on the desk and tapping once on its edge. The image showed Rubio dressed casually exiting the elevator that evening with 3 men in tailored suits. One carried a branded gift bag from a luxury watch company. "Security footage confirms a private dinner at 8:42 p.m., Jasmine said. "No press, no aides, no policy staff." Her finger moved to the faces in the image. The guests were identified through facial recognition records as cryptocurrency brokers based in Dubai, all 3 currently under soft investigation by Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. And then came the cut. "The only strategy here was how to keep the dinner off the official record," Jasmine said coldly. The sentence didn't just hit, it hollowed the room. Rubio shifted again, this time not out of composure, but instinct. He turned his head slightly, scanning left, then right, looking, searching for a face, a nod, a lifeline. But there was none. Not one ally in his field of vision met his eyes. One adjusted his tie, another scrolled his phone, a third avoided his glance entirely. His hands moved under the table, gripping something. Perhaps the table's edge, perhaps his own wrist, anything to stay anchored. Because in that moment, the message was undeniable. He wasn't just being watched, he was being abandoned. The atmosphere in the hearing room had curdled into something thick and unspoken. After the Ritz-Carlton exposure, there was no more illusion of control. Marco Rubio no longer sat like a senator. He sat like a man surrounded by shadows that had once obeyed him, now refusing to move. His tie sat looser. His hands stayed locked beneath the table, fingers twitching just enough to betray the mask he was trying so desperately to hold. No one whispered. Even the scribble of pens had stopped. The air was too fragile for motion, too charged for breath. Jasmine Crockett didn't rise from her chair. She didn't need to. She simply reached back into her folder and pulled out a single-page document with a thick embossed watermark and the sharp black and blue signature of one of America's largest financial institutions. There were no colors, no diagrams, no buzzwords, just facts. Cold, administrative, and devastating. Her hand didn't tremble. Her fingers moved like clockwork. She looked down once, not to review the contents, but to give everyone else a beat to prepare. "There's one more document the public deserves to see," she said, her voice soft but not gentle. "This is a compliance report from a flagged transaction in March of last year, connected to an account held in Senator Rubio's name through an affiliated nonprofit trust." Her words were neither fast nor slow, just calibrated, the kind of rhythm that lands hard because it doesn't try to convince. It only states. The transaction involved a large transfer from a Cayman Islands intermediary. It was flagged for possible laundering specifically due to layered processing and a lack of service justification. She tapped the edge of the paper once, not to emphasize, but to ground the moment. That tap echoed louder than it should have, bouncing through the brittle silence of the chamber like a judge's gavel wrapped in velvet. A review was opened, notes were taken, a fraud investigation was initiated, and then, without explanation, quietly closed 2 weeks later. She paused, and then she looked up. It was the first time she met Rubio's eyes directly since the beginning. It wasn't an aggressive stare. It wasn't performative, but it was lethal, the way only quiet truth can be. Her posture never shifted. Her expression never hardened. It didn't have to. The document did all the speaking for her. Rubio's composure snapped. His voice cut through the air like broken glass. "You don't have the authority to judge me." The outburst wasn't defiance. It was panic, loud, sudden, and defensive, as though volume could somehow push the truth back into the folder, as though outrage might erase a document already printed and logged. But no one in the room nodded in support. No one leaned toward him in solidarity. They just watched, the way you watch something slowly collapse under its own weight. Jasmine didn't even blink. Her body remained completely still. She let the silence return and sit there unchallenged. When she finally spoke again, her voice came low, not as rebuttal, but as a surgical incision. "I'm not judging," she said. "I'm reading the part the bank almost sent to the FBI." That sentence didn't echo. It detonated. A visible wave passed through the room, not noise, but movement. One staffer dropped their pen. A reporter near the side wall froze mid-keystroke. Even the stenographer, usually expressionless, faltered briefly before catching up to her machine. There was no yelling, no banging on the table, but in that instant, everyone understood what had just been said. Not that Rubio might be investigated, but that a bank, a massive legally shielded institution, had considered him enough of a financial risk to prepare forwarding documentation to federal law enforcement. Rubio's color changed. His face, already pale, now turned sallow under the harsh overhead lights. His lips pressed together so tightly they seemed bloodless. A single bead of sweat trailed from the corner of his temple, catching the edge of his cheekbone. He didn't reach for water. He didn't look at Jasmine. He looked down, not in shame, but in strategy, scanning invisible scripts only he could see, searching for a way out. But there wasn't one. From the gallery, someone whispered, "Oh my God!" It wasn't loud. It wasn't planned. But the microphones picked it up. Another gasp followed, raw, involuntary, like a sound made when something sacred is shattered in real time. And still, Jasmine said nothing more. She didn't smile. She didn't speak, because the power in her presence wasn't that she was accusing him. It was that she didn't have to. The evidence had already done it. The bank had already seen it. And for the first time in that room, it was clear Marco Rubio wasn't defending a political position. He was defending himself from the truth. Jasmine didn't rush. She understood the weight of silence when it's earned. She gave it space. Then, with the kind of calm that only comes from absolute preparation, she reached for a sealed envelope near the back of her stack. It was different, thicker, labeled confidential. The paper a matte ivory with a faint embossed seal barely visible beneath the overhead light. She handled it like evidence in a courtroom, not a prop in a hearing. The chamber watched as she broke the seal cleanly without comment. Her hand slid the document out in one slow motion. It wasn't a printout. It wasn't a screenshot. It was a contract, formal, initialed, dated. She unfolded it with care, laying it flat across her desk and smoothing the top edge with her palm. No one in the room said a word, not even the stenographer. And when she finally spoke, her tone didn't rise. It lowered as if the ground itself was about to shift. "This," Jasmine said steadily, "is a formal agreement dated February 7th between Senator Marco Rubio and an offshore investment consortium known as Atlantic Nova Capital." Her gaze didn't leave the page. "A group currently under scrutiny for financial engineering schemes tied to land acquisitions in Colombia." She let that settle for a beat, then lifted the top page to reveal a second, cleaner, sharper, bearing names and figures. "The contract outlines a policy advocacy exchange," she said. "In plain terms, it offers a silent equity arrangement tied directly to legislative positions introduced by this office 3 weeks later." Jasmine's tone was flat, surgical. This was no longer accusation. This was post-mortem. She paused, turned to the final page, and read aloud, slow and clear. "Support legislation to reduce international profit repatriation barriers in exchange for undisclosed 4% equity ownership." That sentence didn't just land, it divided the air like lightning. No opinion, no ambiguity, just a clean transaction. Power exchanged for silence, law traded for capital. Rubio flinched. It wasn't theatrical, it was real. The involuntary movement of a man hearing his reflection out loud for the first time. Then his voice cracked free, raspy and brittle. "I never signed that." He said it fast. Too fast. The words stumbled out before the breath to carry them had arrived. And he didn't look at the document when he said it. He looked at Jasmine, not as a colleague, not even as an opponent, but as someone who might, just maybe, offer a way out. But she didn't. With calm precision, she slid a single page from beneath the contract. This one was printed on stark white letterhead with a small circular stamp in the bottom right corner. Jasmine held it between two fingers, her voice softer now, not gentler, but more final. "I'm sorry," she said, "but you did." She placed the page in front of her like a final piece on a chessboard. "This is a signature verification analysis conducted by 2 independent experts. Your signature on this contract was matched against 5 separate public documents, including your 2022 Senate filing with the Florida Secretary of State." Rubio didn't respond. His lips moved, but nothing came out. No denial, no anger, just movement. Tiny, defeated, unprocessed. And around him, nothing moved. The silence in the chamber had shifted again. This time to something heavier. Certainty. The kind that doesn't allow plausible deniability. The kind that doesn't need explanation. One staffer in the back rubbed his forehead. Another tilted their chair back slowly, as if trying to put distance between themselves and what had just happened. No one interrupted. No one objected. They didn't have to because Jasmine Crockett hadn't just revealed a signature. She had restored gravity to the room, a room that now understood this wasn't politics. It was proof. The chaos that erupted in the hours following Jasmine's systematic dismantling of Marco Rubio spread like wildfire through digital channels across America. What began as C-SPAN footage quickly transformed into viral content reaching millions of viewers who had never watched a congressional hearing in their lives. Within 48 hours, the clips had been shared, remixed, and analyzed by everyone from political commentators to everyday citizens who suddenly understood that government documents could be read, understood, and used to hold power accountable. The phrase, "power is a debt," became more than just words spoken in a Dallas auditorium. It became a rallying cry for Americans who had grown tired of watching corruption hide behind complexity and legal jargon. Jasmine Crockett had done something remarkable. She had made transparency accessible. But perhaps the most powerful part of this story isn't found in the viral clips or the headlines. It's found in what happened next, in the communities where Jasmine returned after the cameras stopped rolling. Because while Washington was still processing the political earthquake she had caused, she was already back to work. In the neighborhoods of South Dallas, where water infrastructure still needed fixing and families still struggled with rising rents, Jasmine carried that same red folder. But now it wasn't empty. It was filled with the names and stories of people who had watched her speak truth to power and decided they could do the same. The real victory wasn't in bringing down one corrupt senator. The real victory was in showing millions of Americans that the system could be held accountable, that documents could be read, that truth could cut through spin, and that someone who remembered where they came from could walk into the most powerful rooms in America and demand answers. Jasmine Crockett didn't just expose corruption. She exposed the lie that government was too complicated for regular people to understand. She proved that when you carry the voices of your community into the halls of power, you carry something more powerful than any political strategy. You carry the truth. And that truth, as Marco Rubio learned, has a way of speaking for itself. The documents don't lie. The numbers don't mislead. The signatures don't disappear. And when someone is brave enough to read them aloud, the whole world listens. This is why Jasmine Crockett's 7 minutes changed everything. Not because she destroyed one man's career, but because she reminded America that accountability is always possible when someone is willing to carry the receipts. The lesson is clear. Democracy doesn't die in darkness. It dies in silence. And sometimes, all it takes is one person with a red folder to turn the lights back on.